You know I can't recall the day your dream became my life. I've lived an eternity with you by my side. You by my side. Like the sun and the moon, I've seen that your light reflects mine. And riding together we have conquered the skies. But for so long I failed to see the truth as I searched for a fantasy that lived within you. Said, how did you know that you'd be my angel?
Hello, I'm Shane Schultz from Serenely Speaking, and this is the Arisen Strength Podcast. Folks, we do this show every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time because we feel there are far too many dreams, talents, and capabilities that are being suppressed for whatever reason. Whether it be illness, injury, or life experiences, these situations find a way of making us being robbed of what it is that makes us special and unique in this world, our passions. Here at Arisen Strength, we encourage people to pursue their passions in spite of the challenges that they face. Now, how we do that is through our three-pillar concept. Number one, we support. Number two, we empower. And after all that work, number three, we get to celebrate. Folks, that's the Arisen Strength concept. Our goal is to help bring back the passions of life to people again. Tonight's episode is number 17, where we talk about mold awareness. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to my good friend, Wayne the Hacker. Wayne, it's great to have you here tonight.
Hey, thanks a lot, Shane. It's great to be here. Really looking forward to another great show.
Oh yeah, this show is one that we planned on doing for quite some time. But we wanted to make sure that we had the right information before we even got to taking it on, because we don't like to go in things halfway. So when we finally got all the information that we were looking for, we decided to go ahead and take this on. And we're very fortunate to have a guest on the show by phone, by Skype, by the name of Spring from Divinely Toxic.
Yeah, it's a great interview. She shared a lot of really good information. And so two of us, we spent a lot of time this week doing our due diligence, our research on mold awareness, looking at what everybody has to say about it. And the good news for us was Spring was backing up pretty much everything that we had read about. So she's a really good, informative guest. I think people are going to get a lot out of what she has to say, and we get a little insight into her, her websites that she has for more information.
Yeah, exactly, and her experience, and because that's the most important part from me, anyways, when it comes to the show is the experiences that people have, because whether or not that anybody believes the situation or not, there's an effect that's out there, and she certainly had an effect with her personal experience and with mold. Yeah, the thing is that a lot of people have come to me and they said, good Lord, Shane, why are you doing a show on mold awareness? And to be honest with you, like I said, it was, at first it was for a favor, for a particular group that has to do with mold. But on top of it, Wayne and I started looking at the different aspects of mold, and that it definitely falls into the Arisen Strength wheelhouse, because whether, just like any other condition that we've talked about in the past, this one does suppress people from being able to pursue their dreams, talents, and capabilities just like any others. So, this is why we decided to go ahead with it, and not just go ahead with it as an awareness show, but really a show that Arisen Strength is going to bring all that it can to it.
Yeah, one of the three things that we like to talk about, we talk about threes a lot, is the injury, illness, and life experience. And people who have been dealing with a lot of mold problems, a lot of them go through a lot of things in their lives, and they have to overcome a lot. And as you were saying, that's right in the Arisen Strength wheelhouse, where people are faced with challenges in their lives, and rather just sort of give up and just be held down by those challenges. They rise up to face those challenges. They make changes in their lives. We talk about this all the time. If you want to get something different, you got to do something different.
Exactly.
It's not about focusing on what you can't do. It's focusing on what you can do. Kick the can't.
Kick the can.
You got to kick that can't, and you got to start making plans. You got to start having dreams, and then you got to start working toward them. And that a lot of times requires you to sort of, no nice way to say this, you got to buck up a little bit sometimes, but you need some support a lot of times because it's hard to do that on your own at first. So, we look to our supports to get us started,
Sure.
but we start doing things different in our lives, making changes, and taking control of life, start living rather than just existing.
Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of the people that I've talked with that have experienced having mold in their lives, I know that they definitely need the support aspect of Arisen Strength. They need to be acknowledged and to be validated for what it is that they feel and are going through. Because quite honestly, the more that I hear about it, the more I hear that the medical field really isn't helping a whole lot. It's not that they're not trying; it's just that there's a whole lot of different symptoms that come along with this condition or illness that stem from mold, and many of them, kind of mimic other type of conditions that are out there, and so you have the doctors doing the best that they can in order to be able to combat those symptoms, and in essence, they're really not getting down to the heart of the matter, which is the mold situation, or possibly the mold situation, depending on what the situation is. And that's something that our guest is going to be talking about. In fact, when we talked to her last night and did the interview, she brought that up on her own without us even talking about it that way.
Yeah, this is a touchy subject, and there are definitely two sides. This is a very controversial subject, but at the end of the day, there's a person whose life is being suppressed.
Exactly.
Their hopes and dreams are being suppressed. There's a person that needs some help, and if the medical community can't help, it doesn't offer the solution that's working for that person at that time. If that person's not hearing what they need to hear from the doctor, they do need to hear it from somebody.
Sure.
They need to, and I have to, we're not doctors. We don't give medical advice, and doctors, they have a certain thing, because it's science based, right? There's a part of science based is you sort of need falsifiable evidence. You need something that you can look at and say, yes, it's this, and no, it's not this. Right. The mold falls under this category of sort of like anecdotal evidence. I mean, you're feeling sick. Your eyes are watery. You're not sleeping. You have constant headaches. You're sleepy. There's these different things that are happening to you, and you know that you have a mold problem.
Right.
So a doctor can say whatever they want at that point, but there's something in your life that has to change because you don't want to live that way. And one of the ways you can start is by addressing your mold problem.
Right.
And truth out there, the mold, everyone's got mold. There's mold everywhere. Yeah. So it starts with the mold spores, and everywhere you have dust in your house, or everywhere there's dust in the world, there's mold spores in the world.
Right.
Unless you're building a satellite and you get yourself a clean room, and you've got mold. So you definitely have mold spores in your house. There's nothing you can do about that, and that is never going to change. The other thing, mold needs something to eat. Mold eats organic material, right? So it eats food. The food's left out. Mm-hmm. But it also eats things like drywall and wood. Yep. Your house has this in it.
Sure does.
Nothing you can do about that. There's three things that are going on here. One is you're gonna have to have the mold spores, which everyone has. You're gonna have to have food for the mold, which everyone has. Right. The third thing is really the only thing that we can control with mold, and that's basically moisture, excessive moisture, humidity, standing water, leaky pipes, puddles. This is the real key, and everybody on both sides of the issue. I mentioned this is a controversial issue, and there are two sides. There's people who say that mold itself is not the problem. There's people who say that mold itself is the problem. But both sides agree on everything I've said about the three things.
Sure.
Everybody agrees that everyone's got mold. Everyone agrees that everyone's got the food for the mold. And everybody agrees that standing water is the problem. And if you want to fix mold problem, you got to fix the standing water problem. You got to fix the leak. You got to find out where that water is coming from. You got to get a dehumidifier in your basement.
Right.
That is something you can address. You can also address the cleaning up of the mold.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like my personal experience with mold. I've got a little bit. I've done some restoration work in Tennessee when, for instance, fire restoration, to where there was a significant amount of water damage that was done, and over a period of time, a mold situation ended up growing through that building, and we had to be very careful in doing things, and really, unfortunately, mold kind of falls into another category that is right in the wheelhouse of Arisen Strength. There are more questions about this condition than there are answers, and you hear that a lot with our show, because we take on some very tough subjects that are not easy to talk about, and whether it be coming from the person that's affected by the condition, or whether it be coming from the medical side of which is trying to treat the condition. So when it comes to, I've had that situation in Tennessee. We've had a situation here in upstate New York where Schoharie County, I volunteered in order to help out there, where there was significant amounts of flooding. Our guest, Spring, she's from Staten Island, where Hurricane Sandy was very prevalent in. And so it left behind the conditions that are optimum for mold to take over. So I happen to live in a house, you mentioned everybody has mold. I lived in a house that had what I called a wet cellar, because we had standing water come in that cellar quite often. And it had mold. There was no doubt about it on the cement cinder blocks, and on the walls and so forth, and the floors. So it was there. We were aware of it. We actually built a room where the mold was after we cleaned it up and everything. It was too damp in order for that room to really sustain itself properly. So I'm aware of what mold can be like in a household. But some people just have different reactions when it comes to having mold in their home, and there are different types of mold as well. I'm not saying that these conditions aren't mold related, because they very possibly can be. I just like you had mentioned, there's not a whole lot of science based studies that can say for without a question of a doubt this is a mold situation. The symptoms are just too similar to any other thing that is possible. We did a show about thyroid awareness. Thyroid awareness. We talked about there's certain levels that are within our body, and if it knocks off one, it knocks them all off. And you have a whole lot of different symptoms that stem from it, whether it be depression, whether it be heart condition, whether it be extreme fatigue, muscle soreness, headaches. This all sounding familiar? This is exactly what it is that comes from people who say that they're afflicted with mold as a medical condition. And so the bottom line is we don't get into all that. We don't get into the whole medical aspect of it and everything. I do that enough for when it comes to my work. But the bottom line is that whatever the condition is, it has affected somebody, it has suppressed somebody, and we're here to stand up for that individual in order to be able to help them, and hopefully we can give some awareness to this situation as to where people can utilize this as, if you have a condition with mold, it can be a speed bump instead of a life.
Yeah, one thing that's definitely true is even if you don't, if you're on the side in which medical science currently, one thing about science, science changes all the time. It does
Sure.
change.
Absolutely.
As it gets new evidence, it changes. It's science. Science evidence is what drives science belief. If they don't have the evidence, they don't have the belief. They're not really saying what's right or wrong. And as you mentioned, there's not a lot of scientific evidence that directly ties the mold to these causes.
Right.
But the one thing both sides will agree on is that mold is there because of excess moisture that's not being properly, evacuated. It's not being properly evaporated and moved off premises. And excess moisture itself is going to have other problems beside the mold. Or you're going to have problems with bacteria. You're going to have problems with viruses. You're going to have, just there's lots of things that can happen. Insect infestation when you have standing water. So there's things that happen. Not to mention wood rot. If you've got excess moisture, first of all, the moisture itself is going to rot the wood, but the mold is going to be eating the wood. The mold is actually eating the wood. Well, that wood may not just be wood, but you might have something with some other structure that's breaking down that's hiding asbestos.
Sure.
Your wood might be a painted windowsill that was built in the 70s, and now you've got lead paint that's now being put up into the atmosphere. So the fact that you have mold is definitely, even if you don't believe that it causes these diseases, you definitely believe the mold is the result of excess moisture, and that excess moisture can lead to all these other symptoms, that's what the doctors aren't saying, that you don't have these symptoms, and they're not saying that you don't have a problem with all these things. What the doctors are saying is that, as far as the science tells them, it's not the mold that's doing that. There's other causes. And because there's other causes, you still need to do something with your life. You need to do something to make those changes in your life to find improvement. And one of the first things you need to do is you need to fix the water problem so that you don't have the mold. And right. The mold itself is very, it's not the nicest thing to have around. It's not, it can be a problem because there are some dangers. Black mold can be very dangerous. So there are some dangers. But that doesn't say that all mold is dangerous. But really, the fact that you have mold is a sign that there's other issues that need to be addressed with your house. And also, if you're dealing with things like allergies, maybe it's as simple as getting rid of the carpets in your house. Maybe it's getting hypoallergenic pets. There's getting a HEPA filter. So there are things that you can do like that.
Right.
That the mold could be making it worse, or maybe not affecting it at all, but it's certainly a red flag. There's something going on that needs to be addressed, and I think that's one thing both sides can agree on and take away, and not turn this into we certainly don't want to make it a fight, because we're all about improving people's lives. What the reason, why your life got better, at the end of the day, does that really matter?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter at all. That's the thing. It's like we said, there's an effect there. Whatever that effect is, there are definitely symptoms that appear to stem from conditions that mold is present. Whether it be allergies, whether it be asthma, whether it be the lower, it lowers the immune system defenses, respiratory issues, extreme headaches, muscle aches. There's definitely some links there where mold is present, and so whether or not that it's a fact or not is not our concern here at Arisen Strength. Our concern is the person. See, what do we always say? Arisen Strength helps the person, while the medical professional, is treating the patient. I let the doctors, the psychiatrists, the therapists, and everything, I let them deal with all that, what they do, because they're professionals. They went to school for a very long time in order to be able to do what they do. What I do is I know the human factor, and I know the what being a patient is like. I know what it's like to be suppressed, not to be able to pursue my dreams, talents, and capabilities because of the struggles that I face. And I know what it's like in order to be able to turn things around. I've had some experience where I've gone from a very low point as to where I was able to turn things around and now I have what I have now, which I'm very proud of and happy about. So same thing here. When it comes to mold, our idea is to be there to support. Yes, there's something going on, and then on top of it, now we're going to empower you. We're going to tell you, okay, look, yes, you have a condition, no question about it. And Spring talks about it when we talked to her last night. You know, she automatically brought up the word empower, and we both laughed because it was like, hey, that sounds familiar. So, you know, and so what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring awareness to the condition of mold. We're going to show that yes, there is a situation, but no, it doesn't have to be a lifetime situation. And we encourage you to do things differently in order to be able to get different results than what you've had in the past. And I think the conversation that we have with Spring really emphasizes that.
Yeah, so we had a really good conversation with Spring. As you mentioned, she runs she has a couple of websites out there. The Divinely Toxic, very interesting websites.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of great information on there, and it was probably a 30-minute, 35-minute conversation.
Yeah.
With her on the phone. We're going to make that entire conversation available, linked on the screen right now. If you want to listen to that whole conversation, go ahead and I certainly encourage everybody who's really interested in mold awareness to listen up to that full conversation, because she has lots of information on there, a lot more than we could fit into this show here tonight.
Sure.
We got some excerpts, little segments that are, I think, really capture her story and what she did, and and we can listen for the Arisen strength story in her story of somebody who had to overcome, her life wasn't the life that she wanted for herself, so she had to start doing things different,
Right.
and the result that she got from that.
Yeah, which is the empowerment. Which this first clip that we do, I actually asked Spring, what was her first experience with mold, and how did she come to learn about it a little bit more, in order to be empowered to figure out how to change her life around, compared to what it is that she was feeling while she was dealing with it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and give it a listen.
It was back in about 2008. I was working for a small company, and their office was located in a basement complex underneath a row of small food stores. And it's a typical little basement office complex in Long Island, New York. And, I was very happy there. And maybe about 4 months in, I started to notice growth on the walls of the foyer when you were coming in. And then an awful it smelled like, pardon me, but it smelled like cat urine. It was a very awful smell, and it's a familiar smell that I'll never forget. Basically, this place was just built to be a petri dish. It had no external airflow. The HVAC system was not very adequate for the size of the room that was actually, being hosted there for little small office spaces. So gradually, the mold got worse and worse until our air conditioning stopped working. And in the dead of summer, that's not very comfortable when you have no windows. I explained to my boss, who was an off-site boss himself, always out in the field, that there was an issue with the air conditioning, and there was some mold growth. And he encouraged me to contact the landlord and, take care of that as the office manager. So I did. And the AVC guy came in to check it. And I was watching him because I wanted to see what was up. I had a feeling something wasn't right in the building. My conscience was starting to get to me because I was getting very ill. I was getting red eyes. My skin was always itchy. I was always sneezing. I even started to get these narcoleptic episodes where I would pass out at my desk and wake up. The gentleman pulls out the filter and was in such disgust, he basically dropped it and ran. And I stopped him before he left, and I said, "What's wrong?" He goes, "This entire place is infested. It's dangerous. You need to get out." And at that point, I realized what it was that was making me sick. So fast forward maybe about 8 months, I'm doing very poorly, and other people in the building are getting sick as well. They're going to the hospital. No one can tell them what's wrong with them. They're giving, tons and tons of synthetic pills that don't really do anything except make you more sick. And I finally was able to get online, and I found a couple of local groups on Facebook that started educating me about mold. And it was kind of the Wild West back then. A lot of people weren't outspoken about it and didn't have a lot of info. But I posted a lot of things in the office and warned people. A lot of them left. And the mold kept coming back and back. And no matter how many times they came in with awful treatments that don't work, like bleach or peroxide, the mold just got literally more angry and pushed on and grew more colonies. And it wasn't just one type of mold. It was cladosporium, it was funicerium, it was penicillium. It was all of them together with the stachy, and basically they were at a war, and we were all just pawns in their way.
So that was our first clip with Spring. She had mentioned the fact that it was like the Wild Wild West. What I think she meant by that is the fact that not a lot of information was out there in order to be able to help people. They just, like the specialist there who was looking at the vent and so forth, and he basically, she kind of painted a picture as to where he knew that something was very wrong and that they were in danger health wise if they were to stay there. But he didn't really have a way of being able to tell her, what to do in order to be able to make that situation better, or for her personally as an individual, aside from the building itself.
Yeah, it seemed like at that time period there was a lot of activity, but not a lot of information.
Yeah.
We could argue now whether there's a lot of information, what kind of information we have now, but back then there wasn't a lot of information, but there was a lot of activity coming off. And this was an interesting story that I found in doing the research this week. I really didn't remember this, and when you hear the story, you're going to think, how did I not remember that story? But it involved Ed McMahon, and Shane and I, we talked about this.
Yeah.
After I saw it, I said, "Did you?" And wow! But Ed McMahon sidekicked to Johnny Carson for 30 years on TV.
Not Vince McMahon with the WWE or anything.
This is the late night sidekick for Johnny Carson. He had a house out in Beverly Hills, and he was getting very sick, and I believe his wife ended up with cancer, and then he had a dog that died of some whatever killed the dog, but he was convinced that it was the mold in his house. He had a mold problem in his house, and he basically took action against the contractor. They settled out of court, but they settled for, it was like $7.2 million. They settled out of court, and that apparently made the news in enough areas where it brought mold to like, whoa, this is a big story. It had been bubbling apparently before then. I think there were some mold stories that came out of Cleveland a couple of years before that, or a year before that. But when the Ed McMahon story broke, I can imagine it became the Wild West. And with Spring's story, I can imagine, no doubt in my mind, she's in that office and she's feeling like she was for as long as she was. 8 months, she said, that went on.
Yeah.
And when they pulled out the vents and they looked behind what was behind the walls, behind the surface, what you don't see, all that black, all that just ugliness, that dank, just it had to be shocking. It had to be really almost an epiphany. There was, she said it right away. As soon as she saw that, she, in her words, she knew what was wrong with her. At that point, it doesn't matter what a doctor is going to tell you. She knows what was wrong with her, and she knows what she needs to do, or at least she knows that she needs to find something to do to make her life better. And from there, I guess, she has a journey ahead of her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of reminded me, you're a Star Trek guy, and there's certain shows that are out there that are similar to like mold, whether it be the blob or whatever that gel-like thing, that monster that was. It kind of reminded me of what that was, and that's because I don't have a whole lot of information in order to be able to say, oh no, it's this. It really does paint a difficult picture in order to deal with. And she, realized that she needed to do something. I mean, she was finding herself where she was, like she said, narcolepsy, finding herself sleeping on her desk and everything. And that's something that is a symptom of something that's very wrong. as well as allergies and muscle aches and headaches and so forth. So I mean, these are definitely symptoms that needed to be taken very seriously and to be addressed. Um, and you'll soon find out she really didn't have that easy of a time in order to be able to get that type of help that she needed.
Yeah, but again, it was an old building.
Yeah.
That much mold means there's a lot of water in that building, so there's a lot of water damage. That much mold's also going to be a lot of structural damage. So there's going to be a lot of things going on that even if it's not the mold directly that's causing the problem, the fact that the mold's there and the things that the mold is doing, it could be causing lots of issues. But I think in this next clip, you remember what we were talking about in this next clip with her?
Well, I know that she was basically going on what it is that she had been empowered to do in order to be able to find the strength in order to be able to go on the internet, do her own due diligence and research. She happened to find a couple groups that were on the internet that helped her, and then she took it a little bit further in order to be able to find what would work for her. And I think she's going to talk about that right now.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and give that clip a listen now.
It depends. It always depends on the size of the colony.
Okay.
If you just have a little bit of growth that came in through your bathroom window and a little bit of moisture occurred and you have a little growth there, that's all right. From my toxicologist and his studies, he was a Mensa level toxicologist who worked with the Vietnam vets during Agent Orange time, which we all know, actually know. A lot of folks don't know that the chemical T2 Agent Orange was derived from mycotoxins. And it was the same mycotoxin that I was sick from.
Mm.
So what he had found, the only relief that these gentlemen would actually, they were so toxified that basically the only thing that would really help them was making sure that they had a clean environment. And through him working on the mold itself, he learned that ammonia not only neutralizes the mycotoxins, and it's one of the only substances that so far can do that and make it not affectable to a human, but it kills the root system of the colony. It actually, once in the air, will pull down spores, and it also kills the spores themselves on the top of the colony. And the trick to it is if it's not large and it's a small area, you can treat it with 3% non-foaming, non-scented, clear ammonia, and the other 97% is just distilled water. And you just mix that with additional distilled water. Now, the mycology of it all is the mold and the colony are just like any other life form. They'll need moisture to live. So upon them bringing in this water, the ammonia content is so small that it ingests it, and it's toxic. But the key elements to growth is leaks and water. If there's moisture, like you spoke of your basement,
right?
Those nowadays folks would know that that's not sanitary conditions. And you're breathing that in constantly. It'll make your immune system weak. It will leave doses of mycotoxins in your blood that will give you chronic illness, and you'll never know why. A lot of folks live with mold, and they'll never know their whole life that they were being sick from this, because mycotoxicosis comes in 3 stages. The first is commonly my allergies are bothering me. I'm a little sleepy, things like that. There's no physical signs.
Okay.
That can last from about 4 to 10 years, depending on the level of infection. In my case, it was rapid, and that was 18 months. So just think of it that way. That's rapid.
Mm.
So it's a very slow condition, and like we discussed with the doctors not being really legally allowed to even treat you for that, many folks, they're left with not a lot of options. So if your house is overly contaminated and it's to the point where you see it physically growing, there's 2 different types of mold, 3 different types, my highest recommendation is to get out. Deal with the remediation later on, get better, and make sure you have your health, because without your health and you have nothing.
So that was the second segment that of my conversation that I had with Spring. You could definitely tell that she was empowered which is something that we like to say here at Arisen Strength. She took it upon herself in order to learn quite a lot about the conditions and situations of mold and the different types of mold that are out there, and what stems from mold. One thing that she had mentioned is that doctors are not allowed to treat for mold. Um, One thing that I want to make understood is the fact that being I've been in the medical field for quite some time. Um, One of the things that happens again is that the doctors are treating what Spring mentions is the symptoms of the condition, because those symptoms really correlate with a number of different conditions that are out there, and so they're just basically trying to stop the symptoms in order to try to find the core problem. But that's what they're going to do first, is they're going to work on the symptoms in order to be able to make the person comfortable and to stop the situation from that point of view first, before actually attacking what is the core problem. And we've already talked about that. But that's something that kudos to her for using her empowerment, her risen strength is what we like to say, to be able to take it upon herself in order to learn what it is that she was being affected by and turning things around. I mean, she didn't just learn about it, she enacted on it. She changed her diet, she changed her way of living a little bit, in which case it allowed her to not only recover, so to speak, from the situation that she had, but it also enabled her in order to live a different and a better life in her view, from those changes that she made.
And one of the things that she mentioned too, which I think is really important to point out here, is if you see mold in your house, or you're trying to clean up the mold in your house,
Yeah.
my first reaction, and the only thing I would think to do, because I wouldn't think to research this, is I would use bleach to clean it up. Hey, it looks like mold.
Right.
It looks kind of brownish. It looks kind of blackish. You put some bleach on there. That'll. Bleach is not how you treat mold. You want to get rid of mold with ammonia. And then she mentioned
right.
using the non-foaming, non-scented ammonia, just plain 3% ammonia, and then diluting that with water a little bit more. And it's not a very powerful solution at that point, but it's enough to kill the mold.
Right.
The mold sees it. It thinks it's water. It sucks it in, and then the ammonia does its trick in there, and you start combating the mold. Now that just gets rid of the mold that you have now.
Yeah, right.
There's these mold spores which are everywhere. There's nothing you can do about that. Wherever you have dust in your house, you have mold in your house. That's a fact. But where you see the mold, that's where the mold's taken root, and that's because there's water that's not being properly evaporated. You've got a water leak somewhere. You've got standing water somewhere. You've got a water problem, and cleaning the mold is one thing that you can do, but that's only the very first thing you can do. You've got to solve your water problem. And even in the end of that clip, I think Spring mentioned that sometimes you just got to move out of the house temporarily while you get to the root of this problem.
Figure it out.
While because it's cleaning the mold that could be a dangerous job. One, there could be a lot of damage behind the walls. There could be a lot of and you start ripping things apart. You rip an old house apart. Who knows what you're going to find down there, and that's things that are going to be at risk. It's further risk for you. So if you're living there and you have a real serious mold problem, sometimes the best solution is to get out of the house, then solve the mold problem, which is more than just cleaning it with the ammonia. It's actually getting there and finding out what's causing the mold to be there in the first place. The mold to grow. The spores are there because you can't do anything about that. But why are those spores taking root, and why are they growing into this mold colonies, and addressing that? And, she found that out from doing her research. She had a mold problem that she was exposed to in her life, and she took it upon herself to find out the information that was available to her, and then to use that information to change her life.
Yeah, and another question that I asked her during the segment was, are all mold the same? Are all types of mold the same? And clearly it's not. There definitely isn't. There are different types of mold that are out there. There are different levels of toxicity through the mold. But the thing that was kind of uh, surprising to me in a way was the fact that uh, there's very few times that there's only one type of mold that's present. Generally, it's a multiple situations to where you have different versions of mold that are correlating with one another in order to create the condition that people are suffering from. So, um, that kind of like emphasizes the fact of how organic this situation is. Is to where they literally compete with one. The molds compete with one another in order to be in that particular spot to be present.
And I'd also like to take this time again to remind people the full interview, which runs a little bit over 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so, available online, link below here on the screen. Um, for you to be able to find that, it's on our YouTube channel. Very easy for you to find. It's the full interview with Spring. You can hear the whole conversation, both sides with Shane and Spring.
Yep.
So what do we got coming up here in this last segment with Spring?
Well, the last segment is really because we're not specialists in regards to mold in any way. Um, so with Spring, she has quite a lot of information that's out there. We have a number of people that are within the Arisen Strength family and in our audience that have had experience with mold. So we're going to let Spring go ahead and kind of promote her sites so that the people that we know and care about can get the help that they need. So,
Yeah, she has
so
a
that's what I'm
Facebook and
going to
a blog. I think she's going to talk about,
do.
and
Right.
her she's really, as part of her research of this, found lots of information that goes just beyond mold. So
Sure.
through her blog and through her Facebook page, you're going to see lots of information that's not just mold specific, but a lot of the sort of environmental issues that people face in their homes and where they work, uh, and things that could be causing um, those those sort of environmental issues, and then what you can do about it. So not just the information about what can be causing it, but some information about at least things that she's heard about or things that she's tried in her life that have made a difference.
Yeah.
And again, it's just an example of somebody in their life who was not satisfied with the way things were going in their own life, and they wanted something different. And we say it all the time: if you want something different,
You gotta change it.
you got to do something different, right? So and she did, and she found the changes. So let's go ahead and listen to this last segment here with Spring.
Sounds good.
Online, I have a blog spot. It's not too big yet, but in future, it's in the making. It's very informative, however, and it's all for free. It's at divinelytoxic.blogspot.com. That's D-I-V as in Victor, INELYTOXIC.blogspot.com. And that's a very extensive site that I go into describing modern toxins, my own personal experience, the types of mold and mycotoxins, symptoms, why alter your diet, what foods to choose, how to make your own body products, even going down to the medicinal herbs that I personally used and the exact recipe and treatment plan. So everything's really literally laid out for you, whether you have pets that are sick from mold, whether you're pregnant or breastfeeding, remediation. Also, I warn about other toxins, for instance, the silver fillings I spoke of that are leaching metal into your body. Those are very important to remove, and I have careful recipes and herbs to take that'll ease the suffering. And I also, on Facebook, have a group where I counsel folks. We're almost at 1,600, so it's getting pretty big. And that's simply, you just go under groups and look for Divinely Toxic, and we'll all welcome you with open arms. Many folks in there have actually recovered, and they're really great at helping me run the site. And anybody can be saved. And the one thing I'm going to extend is that please, please never think you're crazy and you're never alone. I had to suffer like that, and I vow to make sure that nobody else has to ever feel that way.
So that was our interview that we had with Spring. Obviously, it's an edited version. You know, it's little pieces out of a longer interview. Like you said, you're going to have that available on YouTube, and you'll have the link that'll be on the show itself. You know, folks, I want to make this very clear. I know that we've said that you know there's not a lot of science that's based behind this, but quite honestly, we know that there's an effect that's out there for whatever it is. We know that there are people that are out there suffering. I've actually had people that I've talked with who have given away all their furniture and all their clothing because of the conditions of mold that they have dealt with. People don't do that just out of the whim. They do that out of being suppressed. They do that out of being submissive to the condition. It's a submission that they can't beat it. And so this is something that needs to be taken seriously. I can tell you that I've watched numerous different shows on home improvements, and I've watched, I know one of them being Mike Holmes on the Home Improvement channel, to where this situation with mold is very serious. It's not something to play around with. It's not something, it's, you know, if you have a little bit of a spot of mold on the wall or something, yeah, go ahead, get out the ammonia and clean it up. If you think that you've got a problem with mold and you got a problem with leaking of water or dampness or whatever the case, you know, you might want to get somebody who specializes in that so that they can take care of that situation to where you don't have to worry about it anymore. That's part of what empowerment is. It's kind of makes things be compartmentalized to the point as to where they're manageable, in which case it's not something that ends up being a chronic situation like Spring had talked about. So that's our show for tonight. Hopefully we did a good job in order to be able to bring awareness to the situation of mold. Like I always say, there's not one condition or illness or topic that we talk about that can be covered in one show. And that's why we have the Arisen Strength Recap Show on Thursdays. But quite frankly, you know, we're going to be talking about this topic over time, you know, over the next few months and over the years to come. Hopefully we'll have more information in order to be able to help people out even more than what it is that we've been able to do tonight. So I'm actually going to be on Let Your Voice Be Heard, you know, with Maria. I want to say thank you for having me on the show. She had me talk about depression and my PTSD specifically. We had a number of people that were, it's kind of unique, it's a conference call to where they were able to ask me questions and so forth, and just kind of hear my story where they can, you know, kind of be validated for what it is that they might be feeling, or they might know somebody that is going through the things that I've gone through or something similar. And so that was kind of fun and something different to do. And I'm just very thankful and very appreciative that I was given that opportunity. Journey into Light, we're having fun there, aren't we?
Yeah, that's every Monday night. It's on Blog Talk Radio, the Journey into the Light Network.
Yep.
It's Serenely Speaking presents Shane Schultz speaking from the heart.
Yep.
Every Monday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time. No, Eastern time. Not Pacific time anymore, Wayne. That was 20 years ago.
I was like, where are we going?
I know. But that's 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time during the summertime here, Eastern Time. Good for an hour. It's a wonderful little talk show, and we have fun in the chat room there. It's a blog talk chat room. You can log in with your Facebook, I believe, with Twitter. Maybe there's a couple other things that you could use to log in, or you could register with the blog talk account if you want. You don't have to do any of that to listen.
Right.
You only have to do this if you want to get in the chat room with us and chat with us. I believe you can read the chat room without being.
You can read it. You just can't interact. And to be quite honest with you, if you find it to be okay to go ahead and register with your Facebook or your Twitter or whatever the case, it's a fun time being in the chat room. Wayne's in there. He's cutting up. There's a bunch of regulars that follow the network to where they talk about a lot of things. They're very interested in the show. But it's a good time, So and I have not heard. If I did, I would tell you. I've not heard of any type of contact regarding email or anything in that sense from Blog Talk for registering. So just keep that in mind. You certainly don't have to, but it's a fun time. So I would recommend it. But in order to hear the show, no, you don't have to. But it's a good time. Last week we talked about two words that are very prevalent in my life and in my recovery, and that is right now. And we're probably going to do a right now show here with Arisen Strength because we've gotten quite a lot of following and a lot of people being interactive with the show that we had on Monday night. So we're probably going to do something with Arisen Strength as well. This week on Monday night, we're going to be talking about fear. And I think that's going to be something that's I'm going to be able to bring it pretty good there. So I'm looking forward to that. As far as this show, the Arisen Strength podcast, we are going to venture into our block of time, like I mentioned last week. I set blocks of time for different topics, in which case we're going to use chronic illness and conditions, which case next week we're going to talk about lupus, of which I have a family member who does have lupus, and as well as a number of friends in the Arisen Strength family. So hopefully we'll be able to bring awareness to that condition and be able to do what we do here at Arisen Strength, and that is support, empower, and then after all that work, we get the chance to celebrate. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
The sweetest moment of life I ever knew was when I opened my eyes and saw that you were my truth. Said, how did you know? How did you know that you'd be my angel? When your wings were trapped into my heart. And where did you see? And where did you see that we would be wonderful? And our dreams would live where we are. How did you know that you'd be my angel? When your wings were trapped into my heart. And where did you see that we would be wonderful? And our dreams would live where we are. How did you know that you'd be my angel? When your wings were trapped into my heart. Where did you see that we would be wonderful? And our dreams would live where we are. How did you know that you'd be my angel? When your wings were trapped in my heart. Where did you see that we would be wonderful?